Aaron Mitchell returned home expecting peace, but Marlene Cross, the HOA president, had other plans that included stealing his house right out from under him. Aaron Mitchell never expected to inherit anything, let alone a lakeside house, tucked inside a neighborhood as exclusive as Oak Pines. The call from the attorney came late one evening. His uncle Harold had left him the property in his will, along with everything inside it. Aaron barely remembered Harold, just vague memories of summer barbecues and a gruff laugh, but he remembered the house. It was the kind of place you saw on postcards, surrounded by tall trees, a private dock, and sunlight that filtered through the branches just right. He hadn't seen it since he was a teenager. Oak Pines was a gated community with rows of them. Aaron remembered how his uncle used to joke that you couldn't sneeze without the HOA handing you a warning. He thought it was just an exaggeration until he pulled up the neighborhood's website. Dozens of pages outlined rules about fence colors, trash bins, grass height, curtain fabric, and even holiday decorations. It was exhausting to read, but Aaron wasn't worried. The house had sat empty since Harold died 3 years ago. No one in the family wanted the burden, but Aaron saw it differently. He'd been living in a cramped apartment in the city, working a job he didn't love. The thought of leaving it behind to restore his uncle's old home felt like a rare second chance. He pictured early morning coffees on the deck, the lake still and glassy, the silence replacing the non-stop chaos of traffic and construction. For the first time in years, he felt like he had something worth looking forward to. He decided to make the move, but not immediately. First, he needed time. A 2-month solo trip to Southeast Asia had been on his bucket list for years, and now felt like the perfect moment. He figured he'd return refreshed, with a clearer mind and a plan for how to renovate and settle in. He let the property management company know he'd be gone and asked them to keep an eye on things. He didn't think he needed to notify the he wasn't even a resident yet. That would turn out to be his first mistake. He flew out the following week with nothing but a backpack, feeling more free than he had in years. The trip was everything he hoped: 4 temples, hiking, beaches, new friends, and finally, the space to breathe. He didn't check emails often and didn't receive any urgent messages. As far as he knew, all was quiet back home. The house would be waiting for him, just like he left it. When he returned and turned down the familiar pine-lined road toward the property, something felt off almost immediately. The house didn't look the same. There was a new fence running along the front yard, taller, darker, and completely out of place. The driveway was blocked by a thick chain locked between 2 metal poles that hadn't been there before. A bright orange sign on the gate read, HOA Maintenance Zone. Do not enter. It wasn't just that things had changed. It was like someone else had taken over entirely. As he stepped out of the car and stood there staring at the house that was supposed to be his, a sick feeling crept into his stomach. There were no packages piled up on the porch, no mail in the box because the mailbox was gone, vanished. The lawn had been mowed recently, flower beds replanted, and even the window shutters had been painted a new color. Someone had been here frequently, and it wasn't Aaron. He pulled out his phone, trying to reach the property management office, but got no answer. The line went straight to voicemail. Something was very wrong. His name was still on the deed. He had the documents in his backpack, safely tucked away. But standing there in front of a home that no longer felt like his, Aaron sensed this was more than just a misunderstanding. This was a warning. Aaron stood at the edge of his property, staring at the metal chain stretched across the driveway like a barrier to a life that had slipped away without his permission. The house looked well kept, even better than he remembered it, but instead of relief he felt an uneasy chill crawl up his spine. It wasn't just that someone had been taking care of the place, it was that they had done it without him, without telling him, and without any right to do so. This wasn't maintenance, this was a takeover. He circled the perimeter, looking for another way in. The back fence had been reinforced with new wood, much thicker than before. There was no mailbox, no sign of his name anywhere. It was as if he had been erased. Even more strange was the small green sticker on the front window that read Pending Ownership Transfer, Oak Pines HOA. His hands tightened around the strap of his backpack. He hadn't missed any mortgage payments. He owned this place outright. There was no transfer, not legally. He finally hopped the low stone wall at the edge of the neighbor's yard and crept around the back, carefully avoiding the camera above the garage. His uncle had installed a few outdoor cameras years ago, and Aaron remembered at least one of them being disguised inside a wooden birdhouse overlooking the backyard. He made a mental note to check the footage later, assuming the system hadn't been tampered with. Inside the house, the curtains were drawn shut. No lights, no movement. At least they hadn't changed the locks yet. Back at his car, Aaron sifted through the documents he'd brought with him. The original deed, the letter from the attorney, the transfer of ownership. Everything was in order. But something clearly wasn't. He drove to the local post office to ask about the missing mailbox and was told it had been removed at the request of the HOA, citing abandonment and non-compliance. Apparently, after 30 days of inactivity, the HOA had the right to initiate property oversight. It sounded made up, but the clerk handed him a printed copy of a regulation referencing it. The policy looked recent, and Aaron had never seen anything like it during his initial research. Curious and concerned, he drove to the HOA office a few streets away. The receptionist gave him a polite smile until he mentioned his address. Then her face changed. She asked him to wait, disappeared into a back room, and returned with a man in a suit who introduced himself as Mr. Heller, one of the board's legal advisors. He spoke carefully, as though rehearsed. According to him, the HOA had made multiple attempts to contact Aaron during his absence. When no reply came, and the property appeared to be unoccupied, the board activated an emergency measure to prevent blight or safety concerns. Aaron asked for proof of these contact attempts. Heller produced a stack of printed letters, each stamped and dated during the time Aaron had been overseas. None of them had been forwarded. None were emailed, no phone calls, no certified mail, just paper letters sent to an empty house, clearly never intended to reach anyone. It was a trap disguised as protocol. On the drive back, Aaron began piecing it together. Someone must have noticed the house was vacant. Instead of reaching out directly, they seized the opportunity to manipulate the system one they controlled. The new fence, the sign, the renovations, the removal of his mailbox, it all pointed to the same conclusion. They had hoped he would never come back, that he had vanished, leaving behind a property they could quietly claim, reassign, or sell. But he had come back. And they weren't ready for that. Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that something far more calculated was happening behind the scenes. The surface explanation that the HOA had taken precautionary steps for an abandoned home no longer made sense. This wasn't a cleanup effort or temporary oversight. It was a slow, methodical erasure, and it had nearly worked. But what disturbed Aaron the most was the way everyone acted like it was normal. Like they'd already decided the property didn't belong to him anymore. That night, he checked into a motel a few miles away. He didn't trust staying at the house until he knew what had been done inside. First thing the next morning, Aaron returned with a laptop, a portable hard drive, and the login credentials for the old home security system. His uncle had always been wary of the HOA and had installed a discreet set of cameras around the property, most of which Aaron remembered from his childhood visit. The main feed was down, likely disconnected during the sudden maintenance, but the hidden birdhouse cam might have survived unnoticed. After brushing away cobwebs and a thick layer of pine pollen, Aaron opened the back of the birdhouse and removed the small weatherproof camera. The memory card was still inside. He plugged it into his laptop with shaking fingers and watched the files begin to load. The timestamps covered several weeks, almost the entire period of his trip. He opened the most recent clip first. The grainy footage showed a group of 3 people walking through the backyard. At the center was Marlene Cross, the HOA president, a woman known among residents for her strict interpretation of neighborhood bylaws. Aaron had never met her in person, but he had seen her face on mailers and newsletters. In the video, she wore gardening gloves and carried a clipboard, casually strolling along the property like she owned it. Behind her trailed a younger man with a measuring tape and another with a tablet, snapping photos of the yard. Aaron scrubbed through clip after clip. Marlene returned several times over the course of 2 weeks, sometimes alone, sometimes with others, contractors, landscapers, even what looked like a real estate agent. In one especially unsettling recording, she could be seen pointing through the back window and laughing, as if she were already planning changes inside. Another showed her standing at the edge of the dock, gesturing out toward the lake, while someone nearby took notes. The final straw came when Aaron watched a video dated 2 weeks before his return. Marlene was speaking to a couple standing in the yard, both of them nodding as she pointed to the house and then to a stack of papers in her hands. Though there was no audio, it was clear from her posture and body language that she was presenting the property to them as if it were available for purchase. Aaron stared at the paused frame, the couple gazing up at the home like excited buyers. The image burned into his mind. These weren't random visits. This was a plan, carried out over weeks, with purpose and confidence. Marlene hadn't just acted outside her authority, she had attempted to quietly transition ownership of his home. Assuming Aaron would never return to stop her, he copied every video onto multiple drives, backing them up for safety. He also documented the times, the faces, and the actions. It wasn't just the HOA president involved. Several people had taken part, directly or indirectly, all under the assumption that Aaron had disappeared for good, but he hadn't, and now, he had proof of their lies, their deceit, and the disturbing extent of their ambition. They had built a story without him. Now, it was time to tear it apart. Aaron knew the footage alone wouldn't be enough. If the HOA had already fabricated a paper trail, they could just spin the video visits as harmless inspections. What he needed was to unravel their entire It's impossible for them to explain anything away. He spent the next 2 days gathering everything: ownership records, his travel documents proving he'd been overseas, and logs of the HOA's notices and violations, most of which were sent to the house address while they knew it was unoccupied. It painted a picture not of enforcement, but of entrapment. As he dug deeper, Aaron found something disturbing. A clause buried in the HOA's updated bylaws, added only months before his trip, allowed the board to assume temporary control of a property deemed abandoned or neglected for more than 30 consecutive days. No verification process was required, only reasonable judgment by board members, and Marlene had led the vote to implement it. It became clear this wasn't just about his house. This was a system, a quiet process designed to identify vulnerable properties and absorb them into the HOA's control under the guise of order and upkeep. Aaron had nearly been another silent casualty, but his unexpected return disrupted everything. He reached out to a real estate attorney in town, a man named Victor Lang who had dealt with HOA disputes before. When Aaron showed him the footage and the documents, Victor's reaction was immediate. He said this wasn't just an overstep, it bordered on fraud and could involve serious legal consequences if proven intentional. With Victor's help, Aaron filed an injunction to prevent any further changes to the property, effectively freezing it from sale or renovation. He also submitted the evidence to the county recorder's office, placing a formal hold on any title transfer attempts. But what surprised Aaron most was what came next. Within a week of the injunction, anonymous emails began arriving. Former and current residents of Oak Pines shared similar stories: strange finds, pressure to sell, sudden citations after leaving town for extended periods. One elderly couple said their backyard shed had been labeled non-compliant and destroyed while they were out of state visiting family. Another resident claimed he had sold his home below market value after months of intimidation by the HOA board, including threats of liens and legal action. The stories all followed a pattern: the board targeting homes that were vacant, unkempt, or had older owners unlikely to fight back. And at the center of them, all Marlene Cross. Aaron started compiling the testimonies and sharing them with his lawyer. Every account added weight to his case, shifting it from a personal grievance to a community crisis. It became clear that Marlene and her circle weren't just enforcing neighborhood rules, they were weaponizing them for personal gain. Meanwhile, the HOA board doubled down. They claimed Aaron had abandoned the property, failed to respond to notices, and jeopardized the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. They even threatened him with daily fines for unauthorized access to the property, despite his legal right to be there. But the documents, footage, and testimonies told a different story, one that couldn't be silenced with boilerplate violations. Victor recommended taking the matter public. A local reporter agreed to run a story after reviewing the footage and interviews. As soon as the news broke, everything changed. The article detailed the HOA's alleged misconduct, included screenshots of Marlene's unauthorized visits, and questioned how many other residents had fallen victim to similar tactics. What had started as a quiet return home had erupted into something bigger, reckoning that was now impossible to contain. The HOA's control was unraveling, and Aaron, once seen as just a name on an old deed, was now the one holding all the cards. The news report hit Oak Pines like a thunderclap. Within hours of its publication, residents were forwarding the article across neighborhood groups, tagging one another in comments, and demanding answers in HOA forums that were usually filled with landscaping tips and bake sale reminders. The story featured clear screenshots of Marlene Cross walking around Aaron's property with strangers, paired with a headline that read like a warning: Homeowner returns to find HOA president attempting to seize property during absence. Aaron watched it all unfold from the edge of his motel bed, the soft blue glow of his laptop lighting up a room that had become his command center. The outpouring of support was immediate, but so was the pushback. Several board members released statements defending Marlene, insisting everything had been done by the book, and that Aaron was simply twisting facts to stir controversy. But the residents weren't buying it anymore. In response to growing pressure, the HOA called an emergency town hall. It was packed. People who hadn't attended a meeting in years now stood shoulder to shoulder in folding chairs, clenching copies of the article and screenshots from Aaron's footage. Marlene sat at the front, her expression tight, trying to maintain control. When it was Aaron's turn to speak, he laid out every detail calmly: the legal ownership, the camera footage, the fabricated abandonment notices, and the testimonies of neighbors who had also been quietly pressured, fined, or forced out. He didn't need to raise his voice. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation. What followed was a wave of resignations. 2 board members stepped down on the spot, citing deep concerns about how far the HOA had drifted from its original purpose. Marlene refused to step down at first, claiming the allegations were politically motivated and rooted in misunderstanding. But then the county's housing commission opened an investigation, and when Aaron's lawyer filed a formal civil suit, attaching evidence of unlawful entry and fraudulent property transfer attempts, everything crumbled. Marlene was removed within a week. The county launched a broader audit of Oak Pines HOA practices, uncovering a troubling pattern of irregularities that stretched back years. Several homes had been flipped suspiciously fast after similar abandonment claims, always with board approval and always benefiting a handful of the same names. Those deals were now under legal scrutiny, and former homeowners began to come forward, demanding compensation. Aaron, meanwhile, was finally able to move into the house that had sparked everything. The chain across the driveway was removed, the mailbox reinstalled, and the false notices taken down. But the experience had changed him. He no longer saw the home as just a peaceful escape from city life. It had become a symbol of what people will try to take when they think no one is watching, and what can happen when someone decides to fight back. In the months that followed, the neighborhood underwent a quiet but powerful transformation. A temporary oversight committee replaced the board, and a neutral third party was brought in to review and revise all community bylaws. Transparency replaced secrecy, and for the first time in years, residents felt like they had a voice again. Aaron never wanted to become the center of attention. He just wanted to claim what was already his. But in doing so, he exposed a system built on intimidation and silence. The house by the lake no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like home. And all of it had started because one woman couldn't handle his unexpected return. In trying to erase him, they had only made him impossible to ignore.